Hi everyone, welcome back. It's me sitting here by myself doing a proper sit down YouTube video. I can't believe it. It feels very strange. I'm dressed, my hair's done, my makeup's done. Rich is working from home this morning and Gray's actually asleep in her cot upstairs. She started doing these like morning naps, which are amazing. It's been 2 days. I know nothing lasts, but for now I'm just hoping it's a thing. So Rich is gonna go and get her up soon when she wakes up and play with her, and I get to film a video. A little update on how she's doing. She's currently 8 weeks old, which isn't technically 2 months because in like baby land you go by weeks, but on the 16th she'll be 2 months. Anyway, she's very cute. We are loving her. We're having the best time. We're so lucky. She is, I mean, I don't want to jinx it. I try not to say it out loud too often, but she is such a good baby. She's just so happy and she knows what she wants, and for some reason we know what she wants as well. We've kind of semi-figured it out. She's very much kind of in the pattern of eating, having like 10-15 minutes playtime and then wanting to sleep, and she loves her own space. She loves just like being in the cot, being in her bassinet, chilling out or sleeping. Like she'd much rather just be in her own space than us hold her, which I just think is so funny for such like a little girl to be such a little diva. She's just started smiling, which is so nice. So we spent our whole time trying to get her to smile. She's just started making like coo noises, which is really cute. And yeah, we're just having the best time. Obviously there are like hard bits. I don't want to make this sound like glossy. We're both tired and it's really full on. Especially when I'm on my own during the week, just like keeping a human alive all day is pretty full on. Even though you're like doing nice things and going to cafes, you're just constantly thinking of like the next feed or the next nappy change. But we are loving it. We're just loving being mum and dad. Yeah. Oh, that's cute. So that's my little update. Today's video is actually going to be to tell you guys about my labour and delivery, my birth story basically. I loved watching videos like this before I had Gray, so I knew I was going to always do one. Me and Rich actually did film one already, and it was when Gray was 4 weeks, and it was just so boring. We were so tired and monotoned, and I feel like we didn't really explain it properly, so I'm refilming it and I'm telling it myself. Rich might come in at the end, but I've got notes because there's so much to say and this might be a long video, but I know for those of you who are like interested in birth stories, you want all the juicy details. But just as a side note before I start, I wanted to say a few things. First of all, thank you to the NHS. We are so lucky here to have the NHS. They're amazing. I pretty much met every type of midwife in the hospital. We went to all the different like rooms and floors in the hospital, and all the doctors. So I just want to say a massive thank you. They were all incredible in such different ways. Also, Rich was the most amazing birth partner. I've kind of touched on this on Instagram. By the way, if you're not following me on Instagram, that's where I'm like the most active at the moment, doing stories and stuff. So go follow me on there. It's just at Pebbles. Yeah, Rich was amazing, and I think he would have always been good, but doing the Positive Birthing Company's hypnobirthing course, I think is what made him such an incredible birth partner. We owe so much to Siobhan. We did do a one-on-one on her, but it's not necessary. I think the digital pack is incredible. It's a series of videos that you watch. I would encourage you to get the digital pack. It's really affordable, and watch it with your birth partner, with whoever that may be, your husband, your wife, your friend, your sister, your mum. Watch it with them. If you can't watch the whole thing, then at least watch the bits about the birth partner. It made him so much more confident in knowing what he could do to help me during the birth. I think without that, he would have been like, what can I do? How can I help? Which wouldn't have been helpful, whereas he just knew what to do. He was a machine. He didn't eat or drink like the entire time, hardly. He was so supportive. He just did all the right things, and it was incredible. Also, I drink coffee now, guys. It's a thing. Okay, so let's start with the lead up to when I went into labour. I'd been having Braxton Hicks for about 2 weeks before. Braxton Hicks are like tightening of your stomach. And I mean, when I read that online, I was like, that is an understatement. I felt like I was in labour for about a week before I went into labour. They were so uncomfortable. My whole stomach would tighten and it would last for about 5 minutes, which is much longer than a contraction lasts. And I was quite miserable for that last week leading up because I was having these Braxton Hicks. And I really thought, how am I gonna know when I go into labour? Because these are so painful. So I wasn't expecting that. And on the 7th of May, so my due date was the 8th of May, the day before, I went in for a sweep. Sweep is when it's kind of like an internal examination when they use their hand, but they also kind of sweep their hand to try and like loosen the is it like around the cervix, I think? Not entirely sure. I didn't really want to know, to be fair. But for those of you who are worried about sweeps, I didn't find it painful. I guess a little uncomfortable, but no more than like a smear test. So I went for a sweep, and the idea of that was to kind of get things going, but also just to like check where I am, because they can't actually do a sweep if you're not ready. So I went for a sweep and they said I had a very favorable cervix and I was already 1 centimeter dilated and it could be stretched to 2. So I left being so excited, like, oh my God, it's actually gonna happen. Like, they're telling me there's all the good signs, so I'm probably gonna go to labor in the next few days. I was chuffed with that. And then on the next day, on the 8th of May, on my due date, I lost my mucus plug, which is so gross. If you don't know what it is, I mean, I'll say Google it, but don't, because it's gross. Basically, you go to the toilet and you're like, oh, Jesus, what is that? But again, I was so excited because I knew that that meant things were moving along, I was getting closer, and it was actually gonna happen. So I was pretty happy to see that. And then nothing happened. Like, the days just went, and I remember it was like over a weekend, and I was like, come on now. I really thought this was gonna happen, and I couldn't like book another sweep because it was the weekend. But it got to the 14th of May and I booked another sweep. So I had one of those, and yeah, again, wasn't painful, it was fine. And then after that second sweep, that did the trick, because on the 15th of May, the next day, I was 40 weeks plus 6. So I was almost 1 week past my due date, and it was 6:30 in the morning, and I stood up and I felt something happen in my pants. But by that point, when you're that pregnant, you kind of think it could just be me like wetting myself a bit. So I think I remember saying to Rich, like, oh, felt something funny, but let me go to the toilet and have a look. And I couldn't really tell, like I went and did like a wee, and then I was like, I don't know if that was my waters breaking or not. And then I kind of brushed my teeth, walked back to the room, and then I felt it again. So I was like, yes, it's definitely my waters. It's different to wetting yourself. It felt a bit kind of like more flowing and uncontrollable, but not a lot. It was a tiny bit. It didn't like go all over the floor like it does in the films. And my initial feeling was excited, but a little bit anxious, because in my mind, I didn't want my waters to break first. It's actually, I think, quite rare, not rare, but like less people have their waters break first. Most people have a contraction start. And here in this country, if your waters break, most hospitals give you 24 hours to go into labor before they want to induce you, just for like risk of infection. And I really didn't want to be induced. I have nothing against induction, it's just not something that I wanted to do. I know that like contractions can start really suddenly and be quite intense, and it just wasn't what I wanted. So although it's exciting that my waters broke, I suddenly thought, oh God, now I've got like a time limit of when I can go into labor. So they said that if my waters break, to come in and check. First of all, check that the waters were all clear and stuff, which they were. So we went into hospital around 7:30, and I remember saying to her, like, I really don't want to be induced, I really don't want to be induced, I hope my contractions start. And then Rich said, I apparently like was like leaning on the counter like, I really don't want to be induced, and the lady was like, I'm pretty sure you're having contractions already. So they literally started whilst I was at the hospital. So that's quite excited. She said, go home, relax, chill out, come back later when you're like ready to have a baby. So the idea that I had in my head was that I would stay at home for as long as possible and then go into hospital. And that's the plan. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So my contractions started at home, and if I'm honest, they were more intense than I expected them to be straight away. I don't know if that's because I was having these Braxton Hicks for so long that I was in kind of like slow labor for a while. I don't know, but they were suddenly very intense. I put on the TENS machine, which I would highly recommend. It's a little handheld machine, and you stick like sticky pads on your back, and every time you get a contraction, you press the button. It sends like a bit of an electric shock to your back, which kind of tricks your brain to like think that the pain is elsewhere. And that really worked for a little while. And so I was doing that. I was sitting on the ball, leaning on the sofa at home. I had quite a lot of anxiety, which I didn't expect, especially after so much like hypnobirthing stuff. But I just didn't feel comfortable in my home. I felt like in my head, I was like, I just want to be in hospital. I just want to be like, Rich was there and I felt safe, but I just wanted like some kind of medical person there. That's how I felt. So we were timing the contractions using the Freya app, which is part of the Positive Birthing company's thing. You can just buy the app on the App Store, and it's amazing. It plays the hypnobirthing tracks, and then you just press a button when you get a contraction, and it kind of counts it for you, and then you press the button when it stops, and then it times it for you. It's amazing. It's a really, really great app. Definitely get it. But I think with all of these timing apps, you know, it says like, go to hospital, your contractions are 3 minutes apart, but that can happen, especially with your first baby, and then they can slow down again. So the app was saying go to hospital, and they were really close together, And I don't like regret going into hospital then. It was too early, but they felt so intense and they felt so close together, and I've been having these Braxton Hicks, so I thought, actually, what if I'm one of those people that's like going into labor really quickly? Especially if they told me that I was already 2 centimeters dilated. So I was a bit, not worried, but I was like, I think we should go to hospital now. I'd always thought I just wanted me and Rich there, but the minute that happened, I was like, phone my mum, she needs to drive us there. I just couldn't imagine Rich driving, me sitting in the front. I couldn't get it in my head. I was like, I need you to sit next to me in the back seat and I need someone to drive us there. I couldn't deal with the idea of like going into the hospital while he parked the car in the car park or anything like that. I was like, no, 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 no. I suddenly felt so clingy. I was like, you are not leaving my side. So we phoned my mum. We were like, can you come and get us? Which she was like over the moon about, because she was desperate to be there anyway. So my mum came to get us, and the car journey to the hospital was so awful. I can't remember it now. It's true what they say about forgetting childbirth. I'm using these notes. I can barely remember the whole thing. But that car journey, I know, was so awful. I just was so uncomfortable. I wanted to be back on my ball. I didn't like being in the car at all. When we got to the hospital, this is the funniest part. There were quite a few like funny bits of the birth, but this part was definitely the funniest. We walked into triage and Rich went straight to the desk to talk to them. But I didn't want my contractions to slow down now that I was in like a hospital environment, and I just like wanted to get into that birthing suite. And I'd been into this waiting room before and I knew it wasn't like the nicest waiting room, so I literally walked in with my ball, put the ball down, sat on the ball, put an eye mask on, had AirPods in my ears listening to like hypnobirthing stuff or like a playlist, and I literally sat there and I was getting contractions and I was like literally rocking forward, back and forward on this ball, headphones in, eye mask on. And Rich said there was like a row of ladies in the waiting room who were looking at me, like they went like pale, and they were like, oh my god, thinking they could have been there for like getting a sweep or for all different reasons, and they were looking at me like, Jesus, that does not look fun. The lady was like, okay, let's get you into a room and get you checked. I think she was like, you're scaring all my patients. So we went into one of the birthing suites so they could check me, and they did an internal examination and I was only 2 centimeters dilated. I was literally like, what the fuck? I thought I was already 2. I thought I was gonna be like 7 or 8. I was gutted, if I'm honest, because I knew that unless you're 4 centimeters dilated, you can't stay in the hospital. You have to go home and continue labor at home and come back once you're past 4 centimeters. I can hear Rich through the monitor like singing to Gray upstairs. I remember just saying, please, please don't send me home. I cannot get in that car again. The idea of doing that journey home, I mean, it's only like 10 minutes, but like home and then back, I was just, please, please, please. I felt so much safer being in hospital, which is the complete opposite of how I thought I would feel, but I loved being around the midwives, and I didn't want to go back home to my like empty house where I didn't feel safe. So they said, look, we can't keep you here if you're only 2 centimeters dilated. So you can either go home, carry on your labor there, or we can give you something to help you dilate further. And I was like, well, what is that? And they said, we can give you pethidine. The only thing I'd heard about pethidine is my sister Jojo saying, whatever you do, don't have pethidine. She said it doesn't at all help with the pain, it just makes you feel like off your face, like you're on drugs, and it's horrible. So we used Brain, which is like a little thing you use in hypnobirthing where you kind of analyze the situation, think of the pros and cons, and make a decision that works for you. And we decided, let's try it. I think it was an injection in my thigh, and I thought, let's give it a go and see. I just really didn't want to go home. It takes 20 minutes to kick in, and then it only lasts 2 to 4 hours. So they don't recommend having it at the end of your labor, because then the baby could come out like a bit drowsy. So it was right at the beginning, and I liked the idea that it didn't last, because, you know, I didn't know if I wanted pain relief or not, but the fact that it was like just kind of a short amount, with the purpose of me dilating further, I was like, okay, let's just do it. So I remember we were being in the birthing suite and I was sitting on the birthing ball, and Jojo was totally right. The pain didn't change at all. So in my mind, I'm like, I had no pain relief because it didn't relieve any of the pain in the slightest, but I felt, I mean, I've never like done drugs, but I imagine that's what it feels like. Like I literally, like my eyes were rolling back into my head. I can't believe I was sitting on the ball. I think I nearly fell off at one point, but I was just like so high. And I know the timings, like, it's hard for me to tell when I was in it. It didn't feel like that long of a time. It probably was about a couple of hours of feeling like that. And by the time the drugs had worn off and I felt less like woozy, they checked me and I had dilated further. I think I'd got to like 6 centimeters or something. So it really worked, and I felt so much better. I no longer felt like a druggie and I could get into the pool. So I was like, yes, it worked. It was amazing. So although, yeah, it didn't stop the pain and I felt really weird, I'm kind of glad that I had that because it did the job and it meant I could stay in hospital. And I think the way it works is it basically just allows your body to relax, because when I first got into the hospital, I was so tense. I was holding onto the wall and she said, you're clearly in distress. You're not going to dilate like this. So what it does is it just relaxes your body and then your body can dilate further. Your mind is still going, oh my God, this hurts, but your body is chilled. So I got into the bath and I really wanted to have a water birth. I was born in a bath in the 80s when it really wasn't a thing. It was very new and like experimental, and I just loved growing up telling people that I was born in a bath. So I really wanted to do that, and I'm like happiest when I'm in the bath. So that was the plan. So I got in and I was so happy. A lot of my friends said when they got in the bath it was too hot and they didn't like it. I loved being in there, and I spent most of my labour in the bath. So I was kind of leaning on the edge and they had this little shelf. So I was like this, and guys, I was like that for about 10 hours, I think. I was leaning like this. Rich was sitting on the edge, like outside the bath on a ball, and he was kind of like holding my forearms. I mean, afterwards, I ended up with bruises all here because we were like holding each other's arms like that. But I was just leaning outside the bath, and it was about 6-7 hours in the pool I've got here, which kind of just like, I don't know, when you're in it, it doesn't feel like a long time. It just happens. You just graze awake and just playing on the play mat. The time just goes. I mean, poor Rich, because he was still normal. Like, I think at one point he like, in between contractions, he snuck away to have like a duck wrap. And I just remember, I couldn't vocalize it, but I remember thinking, that duck wrap stinks so bad. Why are you eating something that smells so bad? But he was just trying to like feed me and give me drink, and I really, really didn't want it. All I could have was like a bit of coconut water every now and again. And we had these like watermelon slices from M&S, and that was actually quite nice. But other than that, I didn't drink or eat a single thing. I really couldn't. Everyone says that. Most of my snacks I actually used afterwards. When you're in labor, you need it, you need the energy, but it's so hard. You just don't want it at all. So whilst I was in the bath this whole time, when I got to about 6 centimeters, I really felt the need to push. And I couldn't really understand it because I wasn't near the pushing stage. But I said to the midwife, look, I really, really, really need to push. Like, I can't explain it. It's like when you really need a poo and you just like can't hold it. I needed to. And she said, you know, if you have to go with what your body feels. If you feel the need to push, then push. Which I was quite surprised at, because I thought you kind of weren't allowed to push until the pushing stage. They were trying, like Rich and the midwife were trying to get me to breathe through them, but I couldn't. So she said, you know, just push. So it's so insane, but I started pushing from 6 centimeters. Every contraction I pushed from 6 centimeters to when I had her, and that was a long period of time. I don't really know where the energy came from and how I did it, but I did, and I had to. So with every contraction, I was pushing so hard, and I knew that she wasn't going to come out because I was only 6 centimeters, but I had to. And whenever they had to like refill the pool, I had to go and sit on the toilet, and I had to push there because I just couldn't not. Every now and again, they had to examine me on a bed, and that was the worst part by far. I dreaded it. I don't know, I couldn't get on the bed, I couldn't sit on the bed. It was so uncomfortable being examined. I just wanted to be in the pool, and if they said like, can you get out the pool, I was just gutted. Rich was also like holding a little fan, which was really helpful. Yeah, I didn't have, apart from that pethidine at the beginning, I didn't have any other pain relief, and partly because I didn't feel like I had to. I wouldn't describe the contractions as kind of being in pain. I don't know, I can't really remember. I just kind of went with it, and I was okay with it. At one point they offered me gas and air, and I thought, okay, I'll try it, let's see. But the problem is it wouldn't stretch all the way around the bath, so I had to like move to the other side of the bath where I kind of leant back and held on like this, and I didn't find that comfortable at all. So I tried the gas and air, and I also found it didn't like work with my breathing and my pushing. So I tried a bit, and I was like, no, do you know what? I'd rather just be on my like favorite side of the pool where I'm leaning like this. I had a good thing going. Let's go back to that. So I didn't do the gas and air. It just didn't work for me. I didn't really enjoy it. For those of you who are wondering, yes, you do some like small poos in the bath. It's gonna happen if you're pushing. They just get a little sieve, and they scoop it out, and you barely know it's there. Although at one point, another very funny part, my knees were killing me, like from kneeling for so long. I had such bad bruises. So we found this little like foam pad that was like just in the room. I don't even know what it was for. And I kind of put it on the bottom of the bath and knelt on it. But every now and again, I can't really remember why. I think it was when she had to check the heartbeat. Every now and again, I had to lean back on the bath. So I was like taking this pad out, so I wasn't kneeling on it anymore. And at one point I forgot to grab it, so I leant back and the pad just flew out the bath, shot right into Rich and splashed him with all the pooey water. And I mean, I don't even remember if I laughed at the time, but now looking back, My God, poor Rich. So it says here at 5:15 p.m. I was 6 centimeters, and by 7:30 p.m., a couple of hours later, I was 8 to 9 centimeters. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm near the end. I can't believe it. I'm in a birthing suite. I'm in a pool. Everything's great. Her heartbeat's great. I'm great. It's not as bad as I thought. Like, I'm working through it, and I was just really excited at that point. Then they checked my blood pressure, and I was showing high blood pressure. Every time I'd gone for an appointment when I was pregnant, the first time they took my blood pressure, it was always high, especially if I'd been waiting for a long time for my appointment. And then the second time they took it, it'd be normal. So clearly my blood pressure does go high when I'm like a little bit stressed. So they kept taking it on as high, and I was like, of course it's high, I'm in labor. Like, who would be in this much like pain and stress and not have high blood pressure? But they said they needed to monitor it because, you know, it's really important. So they actually ended up giving me something, I can't remember what it was, to try and lower, I think it might be a pill, to try and lower my blood pressure. And it didn't lower. So at that point I couldn't really argue with them, because I was like, well, they've literally given me something to lower it and it's still high. So it's not just a case of me being like a bit stressed and tired. And at that point they said, you can't give birth in a pool in a birthing suite if you have high blood pressure. You have to go up to the labour ward. And I was gutted because I really wanted to give birth in a pool and stay in the birthing suite. And I was just so annoyed because I knew that she was fine. It was just my stupid blood pressure. I couldn't really argue. I was 9 centimeters. I was so close, but my blood pressure was high. So I had to get on a bed, which was horrendous. Oh my God. And then they had to like go take me in a lift. I literally went through the whole hospital. I must have looked insane. I don't even know what I was wearing. What was I wearing, Rich, when they like wheeled me through the hospital?
Are you naked?
No, I wasn't naked. I must have put a gown on. So they wheeled me up to the labour ward. And when we got in the room, I remember my lovely, lovely midwife who had been downstairs in the birthing suite with me. She was like, I've shown them your birth plan. I'm gonna try really hard to like tell them to kind of keep with your plan, because they definitely can. The thing with up in the labour ward, I think the midwives up there are most concerned with the problems, high blood pressure, checking the baby's okay. So when the midwife was like, can we, you know, dim the lights and do all of this? They were a bit like, oh God, really? No, I don't think they're used to like hypnobirthing up there. But she was so nice, and she made sure, so she dimmed the lights. Rich was like spraying this nice smell. It was really funny. They quite liked it. But they basically said, and I knew this would happen, they were like, we need to monitor you, which is when they like hook you up to all of these monitors and you have to lie in bed. So as part of the hypnobirthing thing, I knew the questions I wanted to ask, and I said, do you have mobile monitoring, which is one where you can like walk around? And they were like, yes, we do. We don't really know how to use it, which was, I found a bit frustrating. They had this mobile monitoring, but they didn't know how to use it, and they tried for a while, and they tried to use it, and they didn't really know how it worked. I think after a couple of hours, they were like, we need to just use the normal monitoring because this isn't working. But it was more flexible than I thought. I didn't have to be lying in a bed, which was good. So I was a bit hooked up, which I didn't want. They were checking my pulse. I had like a thing on my finger. They had to check my blood pressure. I had a cannula in my hand. I just really tried to zone out from it and not think about it too much. I didn't want it to like slow my contractions down. So how we kind of set ourselves up there is I was like on all fours on the bed, and Rich was standing behind the bed. I thought he was sitting, but I didn't realize until afterwards that he'd been crouching, like squatting the whole time. Seriously, I don't know how he did that. It must have been like the most insane workout. Knowing him, he was probably like buzzing from like knowing he was getting a good leg workout. Every now and again, I'd kind of get off and sit on this birthing seat, which is like a seat with a hole in it. It was all about like gravity, basically. Letting the baby move down. That was the aim. It says here that at 10 p.m, I can hear her like making her cute noises. At 10 p.m, I was 10 centimeters dilated. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I've got to the end goal. I'm 10 centimeters. The ring of fire is coming. I was so excited. And I still felt like okay. I was surprised by that actually. And I remember thinking like, why is this not more painful? But I don't know. I was like, maybe I'm quite good at this. I'm not sure. So at 11:30 p.m, they were like, you need to start doing long pushes. Because I was up since 6 centimeters I've been pushing, but they were very much like short pushes. They were like, you need to do long pushes. So I was trying to do these really long pushes, but I found that I didn't have enough like breath for as long as they wanted me to push. And they then realized that my contractions weren't really long enough. That was the problem. So after a long time of pushing, they gave me Synto, which is a drug that helps make your contractions longer and more intense. I don't think they told me that part, but I was like, fine, I'll try anything. By that point, I just kind of wanted her out. And I remember the doctor coming in and we were like, wait a minute, we've only just had this like Synto stuff, whatever it's called. we were like, can you just give up? We used that whole brain thing again. And we said to the doctor, can you give us like 15 minutes to see if this works? Because they gave it to me and then very much came in and were like, we need to talk about next steps. And I was like, give me a minute for this drug to work. Like, I want to keep trying. I want to keep pushing. But I didn't realize at that point, I think I'd been like pushing for 2-3 hours, like full on 10 centimeters dilated pushing. Don't know where the energy came from. My mum said she couldn't believe, like watching me, she said it was so insane. She was like, how did you keep going? How did you keep pushing? I have no idea. But she just wasn't coming out. At this point, they were monitoring her. Like, I had this thing that was stuck up me and it was stuck on her head because they could see her head. The midwife was like on the floor looking up at me and she was like, I can see the head. She was so amazing. I had this like one midwife, she was really small and she had like curly hair. She reminded me of my friend Hannah. And she was like, come on, you can do it. I can see the head, it's coming. And I was like pushing so hard. And Rich said that he could see the head was like coming down with every push. And she had this thing monitoring her head and she just wasn't coming, like 2-3 hours of pushing and like she kept coming down and going back up and she wasn't coming. The doctor came in to examine me, but I literally knew as soon as the doctor came in, I was like, oh God, here we go. I could just see it from his face. He examined me and actually, and I don't know why it was only discovered at this point, she was back to back, which for those of you that don't know means that when a baby comes out, they're supposed to be like head down so you don't see their face, but a baby that's back to back comes out with their face first, and it's quite hard because they get stuck basically. They're meant to come out that part of their head first, but what they didn't realize until he checked me is that they thought that they could see her head, but actually it was her forehead and it had really swollen and got stuck. Her head was like this and she basically had got stuck. She was back to back in my pregnancy, but then she also, when I had a scan, wasn't back to back. I think she just kept turning. I think even throughout the labor, she kept turning. And only at that point did they realize she was back to back. He basically said, this baby is not gonna come out. No matter what you do, you could push for 3 days and it's not gonna come out. And it wasn't like an urgent, like, oh my God, rush her into theatre, because Gray was fine. They were monitoring her. She wasn't in distress at any point. I remember when my sister had a baby, like the red lights went off and everyone had to rush out. It was not like that at all. She was fine. They just realized that actually her forehead was stuck and it's not that part of her head and she's not gonna come out. I was gutted. I think just at that point, I thought, I've done this whole thing. And he said, I think we're gonna have to take you in for C-section. And I think Rich was the most, we both just by that point had like lost our ability to make any sort of decisions. Rich was really pissed off. Now looking back, I'm like, no, it's great. I'm so glad I did the whole labor and got to 10 centimeters because now I know I can do it. But at that point, we were just a bit like deflated from it all. I kind of looked over at my mum, who had just been sitting in the corner the whole time. She was great. She didn't really get involved. She was just so helpful to like bringing bags and balls when we had to go up to the labour ward. She was really helpful. I looked over at my mum and I just was like, Mum, and she came over and she said, I think you should do what the doctors are telling you. It's time to meet your baby. Let's just do this. So Rich had to go into the toilet and get into scrubs, and he told me that he had a little cry in the toilet, which is so sweet. And then when he came out, even though all of this was going on, I remember thinking, wow, he looks really good in scrubs. We then got wheeled into theatre. It was very hard to be on that bed. This was 1:45 in the morning. Once we'd made the decision to be like, yes, okay, let's do this, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna meet my baby soon. It was quite fun knowing I definitely was gonna meet her soon. In the hypnobirthing thing, it says that even if you have a C-section, you can have like birthing preferences. You can ask them to dim the lights, you can ask to have skin to skin, you can ask to have musical, all these things. So that Rich was like, okay, right, we're having a C-section, let's ask them to do these things. And he was like, can we dim the lights? And the doctor was like, no, we're doing an operation, we need the lights on. It was actually really funny. He was like, okay, so we couldn't dim the lights, but they did let us have our music playing. So we had this nice like yoga, chill out music playing throughout the whole C-section, which was really nice actually. So we got wheeled in and I had to sit on the side of the bed. So they gave me a spinal tap, which is different to an epidural. An epidural lasts a long time, which is why you have an epidural if you're like 4 centimeters dilated. But because I was right at the end and they didn't need it to last long, I had a spinal tap, which wears off quicker. That was actually really hard because it's a massive needle they need to put into your spine. If you move, I'm pretty sure you get paralyzed. And I was having a contraction, and not a 4 centimeter contraction, a 10 centimeter I need to push contraction. And I was sitting there going to Rich, oh, I need to push. I was literally pushing. I was pushing on the bed whilst they were giving me the spinal tap injection. It was terrifying. And then they kind of lay me down and it very quickly like worked. I didn't really know that it worked until I remember seeing from the corner of my eyes, then putting my legs up in stirrups and thinking, whose legs are they? and they were mine, and they felt like they were detached from my body, and it was very weird. So from that point on, I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna look, because that actually really freaked me out. So I lay down, they put the kind of sheet up in front of me. Very quickly, they just were like, okay, we're gonna start now. And all you can feel is just like tugging. Like, it's a bit like having a mole removed, I'm not gonna lie. You can feel it, but you can't feel it, and it's not painful. And very quickly, they lifted her up. And I remember there were these big lights above, and they literally lifted her right under the light. And I was thinking, oh my God, poor baby, she's like literally come out. And imagine, she's back to back, so when they opened me up, she was probably looking right up at them. They lifted her up and she was like crying, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell, we have a baby, she's here, this is insane. Then, it's all a bit of a blur, but I'm pretty sure that she went off. I think I wanted to have her come to me straight away, but it just didn't really work out like that in the end. But it was all very quick, so it didn't matter. She went off and I went, Rich, go! And he like went over, and I think they kind of cleaned her up and cut the cord, and then very quickly she came back over. And I was planning on doing skin to skin, but the sheet when you have a C-section was literally like up here. It all kind of happened a bit fast and didn't really work out. So I just said, Rich, you do skin to skin. So he took his top off and he did skin to skin, and I like looked over. This is while they're like putting me back together, and oh my God, like all you can hear is like hoovering and sucking sounds, and you're like, what is going on down there? It's so weird. I look over, Rich has her on his chest, and he's just sobbing. Rich like never ever used to cry. The only time I saw him cry was when he proposed to me, like 11 years of being with him, and now he like all he does is cry. It's so funny. But he was sobbing, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cute. I wish I could just like, I had like a mental image of that moment. And then the lovely midwife who I'd had in the birthing suite came in, and she was like, let's get baby next to mummy. She picked baby up and put her like kind of next to my head on the pillow, and she was kind of like crying, and I can't remember, I think she was crying. And I just went, hello, nice to meet you. And she literally stopped crying, and like her eyes were so wide, and she was like looking around, and that was just the best moment. Like she properly knew my voice. It was amazing. So although getting her out was very quick, it took about 30-45 minutes I think to like get me back together, but honestly that time goes so fast because you have a baby and you're like, what the hell? They put me back on the bed, I held her, and they wheeled me back, and I like got back in the room, my mum was there, and I was like, I have a baby. It was so insane. So the whole thing was like, yeah, from early in the morning to like 2:30 the next morning. She was born on the 16th of May, and it was the most amazing, most intense day of my life. I'm so glad I did the whole thing, and I know now what it's like. I don't know what the pushing stage is like, but I know that I can get to that point for next time if I want to. I know that the C-section wasn't as bad as I thought. The recovery was intense. The first week, I feel like every time I stood up, I had to hold myself because I thought like all my organs were going to fall out. But it really was just kind of a week, and then I felt much better. And then we had a whole load of other dramas of going back into hospital because she lost weight and all of this, and the feeding was intense. I'm not joking. I think, I think feeding a baby, personally, everyone has a very different experience of giving birth or feeding, of everything. For me, the feeding was much harder than the labor, just putting it out there. Oh, hey, are you tired? All worth it, hey? She's still got blue eyes. We're hoping she gets Rich's colour eyes. Don't know why, but it's just more fun. As someone with brown eyes, I always think people with blue eyes is really cool. I think she looks so much like Rich, especially when she smiles. But she's dreamy. We love her. So that is my birth, labour, delivery story. I hope I didn't miss anything out. It was ridiculous. It's amazing. If you're pregnant, you can do it. Do the hypnobirthing. It makes you feel so much better. It's just the best thing. You feel like a superwoman afterwards, no matter how your baby comes out. Thanks for watching, guys. Probably be back in a month's time with another video of some sort. Oh, I need to do my hospital bag video where I like watch it back and tell you what I used and didn't use, if I can remember. All right, we're gonna go. You're gonna want some milk soon, aren't you? See you guys soon. Bye.